Hi, and welcome back to the History Hut. I'm Jim. This is Dr. K, and we're talking about Canada during wartime. So I also heard somewhere that you got the vote. Maybe not you personally, but
yeah, I'm not that old.
You're kind.
That's my kind,
yeah.
My species.
Yeah,
my half of humanity. It is absolutely true. There are all sorts of cool things. Yeah, thank you very much. And unlike many people, I actually use my vote every single time. And I'm always saying I'm disappointed nobody ever exit polls me. You know, I go in there, I'm like, and I've won the vote. I'm using it. Don't you want to know who I used it for? Nobody's ever interested. It's terrible. I'd be much happier if there was a red carpet as you were leaving the polling station, you know, and there were like headlights saying, "Way, how was it? It was great. It was great. It's everything I dreamed it would be from 1989." I have a feeling
that's never going to happen ever.
I know.
So,
unless I staged it myself.
Yeah.
I suppose I take
my
History Hut stuff with me, and you could exit poll me. There's a provincial election coming up. That would be fun. I could do that. Then it would really feel like I had the vote, you know. You don't want voter apathy, do you? No, you don't.
You get to stand behind the bit of cardboard. That's the rush.
And in America, they get a whole carton and everything.
Move to America.
Thank you. You're so mean. Okay, no thanks. I'd rather live here.
Keep your bit of cardboard.
Even with the government that's
you can recycle it. Everything.
That's true. Yeah. Nobody ever tries to see where I put my X or anything. It's really depressing. I think they should cancel the secret ballot. It should be like the old days, you know, before Confederation.
Women get the vote, then they try and change everything.
That's right. That's what we were hoping to do, you know. Okay, so women. What happens to women during the war? Women, of course, as I mentioned before, needed in the workforce as the labour shortages increased. And at first they were just given clerical jobs because, you know, they were like, well, we'll give you a feminine job so that you won't be masculinized by this whole process. So it wouldn't become unwomanly and that men would still want to sleep with them after the war and so they could make more babies for Canada and all that, you know, the usual kind of stuff. But there was a clear understanding that women in the workforce, this was a temporary thing. That, you know, it was called helping out. So you like come and help out, and that you would go home after the war and do what you usually did. And women who we refer to as maternal feminists, first wave feminists, they also kind of accepted that. Like, we wanted to push for the vote, they wanted to push for social reform, but they didn't really want women to go into the workforce at all. So by 1916, you have women recruited for factory work, and then you have you know, single women, then it's married women, and you have upper and middle class women also volunteering to help collect things like socks and roll bandages and, you know, collect bottles and cans for recycling, all the kind of fun stuff. So the upshot of all that is that women were in the public sphere, and it helped undermine that stereotype that women were these frail creatures that, you know, they'd fix flowers in a vase and then faint from the effort, you know. It's just like, and it's so not real, you know. Most women are probably out working as domestics or maids, or, you know, they're working somewhere. They're not at home watching their maids do things for them, you know, and fainting and getting the vapors and stuff. But that was the kind of general sense of what women were like. So many women did actually stay in the workforce after the war in what we call the pink bureaucracy. And of course, this is the age of steno pools and, you know, secretarial pools and stuff. So women, they don't all go home, but the general sense was still that after you got married, that was the time to leave the workforce and let all the other singlies come in and do their thing. So during the war, the other great thing that happens during the war is that women not only make some money of their own, but they win the right to vote. And they win the right to vote in provincial elections in the West in 1916, and then 1917 in places as diverse as Ontario and Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island in 1922. But not in Quebec, where it's very, very conservative, and the church fights against it because they don't want women to just start thinking of having other roles other than mother. So in Quebec, they don't get the provincial vote till 1940, which is in line really with France and some other places. but not in the rest of Canada. In federal politics, they received the vote, and we talked about this already, they received the vote as part of the Military Voters Act in 1917 if they had a male relative in the army, you'll remember. If your dad was in the army, you get the vote. And then after the war, all women over the age of 21 received the federal vote. So we get to keep the vote after the war. Now, you know I like reading from primary documents. There's an absolutely wonderful collection of primary documents by, I think, Thorner's the editor, and it's called A Country Nourished on Self-Doubt. I think the pre-Confed one's called A Few Acres of Snow, Canada, and the second one is A Country Nourished on Self-Doubt. And in chapter 7, there's a section called Perfect Justice and Harmony, Votes for Women. So just want to kind of share with you, because it's really interesting, share with you a number of the approaches, just a few. One is John Dryden, who was the Minister of Agriculture in the Ontario Legislature, writing in 1890s. Another was James Hughes, writing in 1910. Bates from the Grain Growers Guide, 1911. Henri Bourassa, Quebec politician, of course, and editor of Le Devoir, writing in 1913, and then Nellie McClung, writing in 1915. And of all of those, it's only Hughes and McClung that are actually positive and think that women should, in fact, get the vote. So the minister, so just to give you a sense of why women weren't supposed to get the vote, even though they were kind of arguing for it, John Dryden was giving this speech in the Ontario Legislature, and he said, well, of course, you just have to go back to the Bible, go to the creation story. That's all I have to say, women. You know, God created man, women was made from man, women was made for man. So why would we give her the vote and upset the delicate balance? So he says women are not to usurp the authority of the male. And this goes back to something we've talked about before in Scottish history. John Knox, the first blast of the trumpet against the monstrous regiment of women. Like, if women rule, you don't have to follow them, because this is just against God's divine order. So this is a long, long life. But Dryden concludes that the woman's place is to submit, that her having authority goes against God's divine plan, and of course the other sop to women. Look, you have so much power at home. Don't you even realize that? You know, the men, we have power out there in the big bad world, but you have total power at home, and so you should, you know, you have all this indirect power, and you should be content with that. And he goes on to say that women, if they have the if they have the vote, all they'll do is they'll want to elect handsomer candidates. So we won't vote, and I must admit, I did vote for Trudeau because I thought he was kind of cool looking. So we'll just pick handsome candidates. Also, evil things would happen to the country if women got the vote over the long term, because women would also then, drumroll, have the right to be elected.
Oh my
God
goodness.
forbid! And that would unsex the woman. So she'd be unsexed, and it would emasculate the country. So the country would be emasculated and the woman would be unsexed. So, you know, all you have to do for him is just appeal right to the Bible, you know, but and all the other stuff's extra. It's all kind of frosting on the cake. And he says that it's only a low type of womanhood that wants the vote, that this is the ambition of women who are masculine in character and who dislike other women and who want to be men. And so all you'll get is the lowest type of women, who are hairy, manly sorts of men, you know, manly women. And he even suggests that there might be something maybe a little wrong with effeminate men using their vote. So you don't want manly women, you don't want effeminate men. And that women should hold it as a joy that men protect them and provide for them, because he wants to provide for them. Their husband wants to provide for them. So they should just like shut up and put up and realize what a wonderful thing this is. And also it will bring terrible injury to the home, because if you give a woman the vote and she's determined to vote for this handsome candidate, but her husband is going to vote for the sensible candidate, it'll just cause disharmony in the home, and the husband and wife will fall out. And she'll do anything, she'll stop at nothing to get him elected. And if the home is the strength of the nation, it can't be tampered with. So again, you know, this look, you don't have direct power, but you've got lots of indirect power. You're in charge in the home. Just let that be enough for you. And he also talks about politics being degrading to women, which is very interesting, because you think if it's degrading to women, it must also be degrading to men. right? How can it be one for one and not for the other? So women will be degraded by entering politics. And if she insists on being equal to us, she'll lose all her privileges and she'll have to look after herself. There'll be no more doors held open for those women that say, let me see your voting card. All right, I'm not holding that door open for you. So just crazy. And then, of course, he has to address the question that there actually have been queens in the past. And so what he says is, even Queen Victoria, you know, she's cool because she's a mum. And she's a good queen because she listens to her male counsellors. And that's all there is to it. So it's really, really interesting. And then Hughes, talking on the positive side for equal suffrage, he goes through and rebuts the lists that everybody gives. You know, well, women won't use the vote. And he says, so what? Men, sometimes men don't use the vote. Doesn't mean we take it off them. Maybe in Australia, but not here. And he says, yes, women have a different nature from men, but that's good because their votes can be complementary to men's votes, and that politics are degraded because women have been kept out of them. And if it's that bad, let's not anybody have the vote. It's that degraded. Women having political power won't unsex the nation or the army. There will be no emasculation. And then he says, and women aren't just going to vote to have women-only parliaments. You know, what's your problem? They're still going to vote for whoever the candidates are, and they're probably going to be male. And one of the other strange things that people often were heard to say was women didn't have the physical strength needed to cast a vote. And so, of course, all these people had to say was, like, all you have to be able to do is pick up a pencil and, you know, walk into a building. It's not that tough. And there's also an argument that women's brains are smaller than men's brains. And so he says, well, in that case, why don't we start measuring all the small-headed men that come into the polling station and take the vote off them? Like, we don't do that. So why would we do this to women? And then the last one, I think, is that that women are, because this whole thing about hysteria in the 19th century, women are all hysterical. So women are kind of mentally nervous. They have all these nervous conditions. He says, like, lots of men have nervous conditions as well. We don't take the vote off them. So, you know, so it's really, really good. Just kind of goes through it one at a time. And then there's this other guy, H. Bates, from the Grain Growers Guide in 1911, and he does a kind of straw poll of the 3 women he knows, and he says, you know, I've asked all my friends, and 75% aren't bothered at all about it, and 25% oppose it. So all 4 of his women friends are like, no, I'm not interested at all. And then he says, you know, women, you can't have it all. You know, you're making it like we're these monsters, we're keeping the vote from you. But since you bring up the children, why don't you do a better job of it? Why don't you do a better job of bringing up men? Then we wouldn't be monsters. You know, it's like kind of crazy stuff. And then, and his one is just absolutely great. He says, science, because science is the god, right? Scientific studies say that it takes a lifetime to be good at one thing. So a woman will need to devote all her time to being a good housekeeper. Women are not created of the same stuff as the heroes of old. You have to, if you're going to be a good woman, you have to be able to, you know, wash a whole pane of windows, not just one. So science, absolutely. And then goes back to the Bible. You know, well, the Bible says women created for men. Henri Bourassa, who's really quite forward-thinking in a number of areas. He's not happy about the suffragettes either. He says that they have enough influence at home. This is a kind of typical fallback position. They have enough influence at home. By God, you're bringing up the next generation. What more power do you need? You've got more power than we have. We're just voting. So he says that. And he also then, and maybe this is the reason why it takes so much longer in Quebec, says, this is an Anglo-Saxon thing. This is an Anglo thing. French-Canadian women don't need the vote. We're not all Anglo like you are. You know, our women don't want to hold sway over society, so they don't want to play the same political role as men, so just kind of lay off. And then again, instead of the vote, women should focus on an area that they care about and be unobtrusive about it, and that they should flatter, if they want to get something changed, if they want social reform, they should flatter somebody that's in power. So use all their charms, and this will be all kind of hidden work. And also he says that women aren't capable of understanding or thinking about broader issues. They're only good at specific tasks. So again, with the mop and the, making the dinner. And they don't realize that with the vote comes duties and obligations and military responsibilities. And of course, you can't possibly take part in any of those kind of things. So back off, biatch, stay at home. So it's really, really interesting. He says because of the difference of the sexes, you just can't do it. That in fact women aren't being oppressed by not having the vote. They are being emancipated from obligations incompatible with the role of mother and wife and the normal roles of the majority of women. So I mean, they're kind of persuasive arguments about all those things. And yeah, he says, just because men sometimes fail at politics doesn't mean women would be any better at it. You wouldn't replace an incapable mother with a male wet nurse or a nanny. A male nanny, so there you go. Male wet nurses, so there'd be a thing. And then, so the last one that I just wanted to mention is Nellie McClung from In Times Like These, 1915. So she, again, addresses the issue of political participation possibly corrupting women, and she says, you know, as well, if it's going to corrupt women, it also corrupts men, so we're all humans. Let's just all get corrupted together.
Yeah.
Let's get physical. Let's get to the poll. And she gives a really funny example of a stinking, smelly house, and a wife being told, oh yeah, you don't touch the house. This is supposed to be corrupt politics, and says that women have cleaned up things since time began, and they'll do it in politics as well. And there's a really funny bit where a man comes home and the kids are all crying and they're starving. They're snotters running down their faces. They just look miserable. The fire's out, and the man says, "Where's your mother?" And the child says, "She's off voting." Like it's going to take 4 years and the whole house will be destroyed. So it's really funny. And so she does the same thing that Hughes does. You know, she says there won't be disharmony in the home if women participate in public affairs. It's hard to believe that different political views would ruin a marriage, and she points out that fathers and sons often have different political views, and it doesn't destroy the family. So why would it destroy the family just because, you know, it's quite sensible. She says there's lots of other stuff for couples to argue about. So it's odd that in this instance that single women be allowed the vote and married women not be allowed the vote. And she also addresses the question of what would happen if you don't vote the same way as your husband. And she says, well, first of all, nobody can tell. As we all know from my experiences, it's a secret ballot. So it doesn't really matter. And she says, you know, surely the husband's a dependable sort of guy, and surely they'll discuss these things. And it's, you know, again, it's not going to kind of, you know, make everything come to a grinding halt. And then she addresses the other issue, will all women use their vote? And she says, well, there's no harm done if they don't. Many men don't vote. And she's really, really quite funny. She says, it's not a dangerous thing to leave lying around. I'm like, oh my God, there's still a vote over there. What's it doing? Oh no, it's going to start walking out the door. And then just, you know, she says, you don't have to vote. You don't have to send your wife out into the world, throw her into a pub full of lecherous men that are going to be pawing at her. I mean, she's just going to a voting booth. She goes to church every Sunday, likely. She goes to meetings. You know, she's used to doing these kind of things. And it doesn't take forever. It's probably shorter than going to mass or a service on a Sunday. You just go in, 15 minutes later, you're back out, like me, expecting the red carpet. And she says she doesn't think that women should be thought of as too good for regular life, you know, participation in the outside world, not like a kind of flower. She should come off her pedestal, and she should, in fact, get stuck in more often in public affairs. And of course, all through this period, women are voting provincially. You know, they're going to start getting the provincial vote, and they're part of, you know, they have church votes, they have school board votes, all sorts of things. Oh, and at one point she says, oh, you know, all these men, they're like, oh, we can't have women coming out and doing all this stuff. And she's like, you're surrounded by women. You have women cleaners at your work. There's women everywhere. You know, bring them down off the pedestal and just see that they're real human beings like you. And she also thought that it gives, like she's talking about this idea of indirect influence. She says it will give more dignity to women, so that you don't have to beg and ask your husband how he's going to vote and try and change his mind one way or the other. You can actually use your vote. And she says as well, there's nothing wrong at all with women being portrayed, or as they are portrayed, as being quite sentimental. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Women are honourable and honest, and they're loyal, and all those things are perfectly good sentiments. So So she kind of ends by saying it doesn't matter if some women don't see the benefit of the vote. People are indifferent about lots of things, and lots of things that they should care about. And that's true. I mean, even in the modern world. So voting won't be forced upon people. So we shouldn't lose our chance as women for the vote just because of that. So it's really, really very, very interesting. But do you think it's still kind of interesting to hear the different views?
Yeah.
You know, these arguments that had lasted for a long time and were really, really strongly held views. Yeah, you don't want that little petal out there in the world realizing there's wars and stuff, and she could be at home baking a chicken pot pie for you and been quite happy. Right?
Pretty good argument.
Yeah. Well, as I said before, at least I use my vote all the time, not like some people. I think you vote as well, though, don't you? Do you vote? Upcoming? There'll be an upcoming. Well, there's always an upcoming election for something. Yeah. So very interesting with the women thing. And there's more, but I'm not going to tell you it right now.
Yeah, well, I guess that wraps up part 2 of our discussion of Canada during wartime. Join us again for part 3.